Doctor Who's visual effects in the 1960s might look a bit dated in 2020, but considering time and budgetary restrictions, they're quite impressive. Today, I attempt to create a model sequence just like they would have in the 1960s. There is something about a miniature TARDIS flying through space that gets Doctor Who fans excited. Maybe because we're very boring people, or maybe it's just because there's something magical about it. As many of us are kind of stuck at home at the moment, I thought it would be fun to do something a bit different. I've always been fascinated by model sequences, and it's something I've never tried for myself. So I grabbed my TARDIS toy, I grabbed some bit of string, some black card and some fairy lights, and decided to give it a shot. Basically, I set up some stands, what I used for my backdrop here for my filming, and I put some black card on it, which I thought was a really good idea at first because I was gonna like poke holes through it and try and like shine light through it, and it just was not giving the effect that I wanted. So I decided to use fairy lights instead. If I was to do this again, I would use just a black sheet instead. Something thick and non-reflective would probably be best. Trying to create something from the 1960s with modern technology will never look correct. So I've tried a few different techniques in order to give that 60s look. I set up my lighting a bit differently. Usually I would have a light on the side and a fill light, but I decided against using a fill light this time because I felt as if I really wanted a strong light source, because I really wanted strong shadows like they would have in the 60s. In order to give a real 60s effect, I decided to use a Pro Mist 1.8. This just gives the effect of a bit of a blooming, so it gives that more of a vintage look, because film has a more softer impression than digital does. Digital is very sharp, because clearly I'm using a digital camera instead of a film camera. And then this also helped to give the effect that the TARDIS was flying away from a sun or a star of some sort. But also by doing that, it has amplified the string a little bit more. In the 1960s, to distract from the string, sometimes they would film their model sequences upside down. This was done in the Dalek invasion of Earth, and the string is from the bottom, and then they flipped it in post. Since my original idea for the starfield didn't work, I decided to do fairy lights instead because I wanted to get a more natural glow. If I was trying to be more realistic, I would have used an actual painting of stars, but I am not very artistically inclined, so I thought it would look worse, so I decided to do it a bit cheaper. I thought I had more white fairy lights, but apparently I just have rainbow fairy lights, which is, of course, say gay rights. But I think the lack of fairy lights just shows that, the BBC couldn't afford more lights, so therefore I can't afford more lights, so we're just gonna say it's an artistic choice. I originally intended to shoot this in 4:3 black and white, but I also recorded it in 16:9 in color as well, just for safety. But because it was meant to be cropped into 4:3, you can see light stands and me moving around with some string. The good thing about the 1960s TARDIS is that it's easy to attach string on the top because of the actual lamp on top. I tried to mount the Jodie Whittaker TARDIS, but it hasn't got the same type of clamp, so I couldn't do it properly and I couldn't be bothered. And plus I wanted to use the 60s one anyway. One of the more annoying things about this toy is that it has speaker holes in the mold. So if there was actually speakers installed, it would come out here, but there isn't any speaker sound in there. So it's just an annoying thing that doesn't do anything. It looks really nice when it's spinning all the other way, but as soon as you spin to the awful thing, it looks really, really cheap. I think one of the most important things about this project is kind of doing it all in camera. What you got in the camera was what you were going to show on BBC One that week. So the only filter I put on it was some minor color correction and to put it in black and white, and that was it. Also notice, I haven't lowered the resolution. This is because model sequences were generally shot on 35mm film, which is high quality. Here are some screenshots of the Dalek's master plan pre-filmed sequences on 35mm. The reason many model sequences are in low resolution now is because the original 35mm film was junked, and only the video version exists. I think the results are far from perfect, but it was an interesting experiment. I think if you're interested in model filming, I think you should give it a go. I think I'd like to remount the whole thing and try and do it again, or maybe do some model sequences from missing episodes or something cool like that. But ultimately, who doesn't like seeing a TARDIS float through space? And there's something about using model work, it makes it feel more real. The movement is more natural than CGI. Even though I'm a sucker for CGI replacements, I think the original model sequences, if they exist in their original quality, always look that little bit more nicer. And don't forget to subscribe to the official Josh Snares YouTube channel.